Are you coming to the tree where they strung up a man? They say murder three. Strange things that happen here. No stranger would it be if we met at midnight in the hanging tree?
Coffee. Without it, we would never have had the Industrial Revolution. We'd all be still living in Europe in mud huts. Here in Laredo, we have the Organic Man Coffee Trike. 4501 McPherson, the best coffee on the planet. If you can't get to Laredo, you can order from the Organic Man Coffee Trike shop. Welcome to Storytime. I'm your host, Chris James. This is going to be the second book in the Bag series called Here We Go Again. I didn't set out to make a series, it was just going to be the one book, and well, having invented so many colorful characters, I thought it'd be terrible waste to just never use them again, so I wound up doing 8 or 9 books. Anyway, I hope you enjoy the following story. I'm going to try for 1 hour each episode, but it never works out the way I plan. Chapter 1: The Antique Store. Don Bandolerium sat behind the counter, deeply into his favorite pastime, which involved doing nothing much at all. His feet were comfortably lodged up on the counter. His head had found a nice place to rest on the bookshelf behind him, right next to the bust of Shakespeare. The jingling of the bell above the front door announced it was time to sit up and see who was coming in, hopefully with intentions of buying lots of goodies. Quickly removing his feet from the counter, Don came to what he hoped was a business-type attitude. "And how might I be of service on this fine Monday morning?" He laid the treacle on a bit thick. The customer appeared to be an old lady. A very old lady. A very, very old lady. She was limping across the floor, one hand attached to an old wooden cane. The other was busy dragging a large leather case behind her. She was dressed as if to be sure anyone seeing her would know she had been around for a long time. On her head was a black pillbox hat with a veil of all things. This was probably in vogue back in the 50s, but hopefully would never come back in fashion for a few more decades. Her makeup was too much and all the wrong colors. It had been applied in the dark and with her eyes closed, using a trowel or a mop. The dress was black as well, giving her a shape reminiscent of a far younger body. Something underneath was holding things together but losing the battle. There were small black lace flowers attached at odd locations that would have been appropriate at a funeral. It came to just below her knees. Her stockings had been rolled down to just above her knees. Here was another fashion statement that needed to never be renewed. The shoes were high-heeled and clunky. As she moved from the door to the counter as if each step might be her last. Dan considered jumping up and giving her a hand with the obviously heavy case, but his old bones convinced him to allow her to gain whatever exercise she could from her march across the floor. Stopping in front of the cash register, the old lady hefted the case up and onto the counter with a loud thud. "Give me $500 for this thing." Not so much a request as a demand. Don looked at the container. The lid was carved with small, intricate symbols. Looking closer, he saw they were tiny creatures cavorting in a woodland grove. One looked as if it might be Pan. He asked, "What's inside?" "No idea. Got no key." The lady held out one hand. "Give me $550. Don wanted to haggle. Not knowing if the case was empty or filled with valuables, he tried to get a good price. "I'll give you 600 for it." "Wait a minute. That wasn't right." "Okay, I'll take 700 then." The fingers of the extended hand wiggled as if working on their own. Don figured he'd best seal this deal before he accidentally paid more than he wanted. "Here's $750, my final offer." He grabbed a handful of bills from the cash register and handed them to the old woman. Grasping the preferred greenbacks, the old lady turned and dashed for the door. As she went, her step was considerably better than her entrance. The cane was held like a baton in a relay race. Don had an uneasy feeling he might have been taken. Thanks for your business. Come back soon." He hoped to never see her again. The case sat on the counter, drawing him to it like a moth to a beer. I wonder what's in there." The words escaped from his mouth as his hand reached for the buckles holding things shut. Looking inside, Don found no locking mechanism. Looking close, Don found no locking mechanism. The only thing keeping him out was a set of leather straps that encircled the case. Looking around, he saw no reason the case couldn't be opened immediately. "I thought she said she couldn't open this thing." He unbuckled the straps. Now the only thing keeping the case closed was gravity, and that could easily be overcome. Grasping the lid, Don lifted it just enough to peek inside. A glow seemed to come from within. Lifting the lid, Don was shocked by what he saw next. "Oh my God!" Chapter 2. The Bag Office. Pam grabbed her cup of joe and went to her desk. She was early today and wanted to get a good start on what was turning into a perfect day. Well, at least the first 2 hours had been perfect. Stepping around her desk, she found Prince Guapo de Cuerpo was sound asleep in her chair. The giant cat was laying on his back, all four paws sticking in the air. "Hey, Prince, would you move? I need to sit down." The cat did everything he could to ignore this human. After all, he lived here. She was just visiting. "Come on, I have work to do." Pam poked at the cat in the stomach. All this elicited was a purring sound that seemed to fill the room. "Move, you hairy thing." When it became obvious the prince was not moving, Pam grabbed a chair and drug it to the side, and then slid one of the chairs from the waiting area over so she could get on with her day. As soon as Pam was seated at her desk, the prince jumped down and went in search of someone making less noise than this receptionist. A receptionist was her title, but not her job. After getting hired to work the front desk at her uncle's business, Pam had found she had talents that went far beyond anything she had known before. But more about that later. The phone began to ring. Not some kind of made-up jingly sound, but an actual ringing caused by a bell set inside the phone. It was an ancient thing made from compressed rubber. Black, with a rotary dial with numbers. Well, there had been numbers at one time, long ago, and now one or two were mere hints of numbers. You had to guess or count from the numbers that still remained partially visible. Pam snatched up the handset and answered with her best ever happy voice. "Thank you for calling the Bogus Anomalous Group. How might we help you today?" Her voice oozed cheerfulness and optimism. The voice was barely audible. Um, hello? I think, that is, I need some help. I have something in my house, I think. Maybe if you could help me? There was static on the line. We'd be more than happy to come by and see what's going on. Could you give me some details? Are you seeing things, hearing things, or smelling things? Um, all of the above, actually. I see. Pam didn't. Do you feel threatened by whatever it is that's in your home? Um, threatened, like, as in, am I in danger? Pam was growing just a least bit frustrated with this call. Yes, have you been attacked or scratched or beaten about the head? Something bit me the other day. I think it was a red ant. Tell you what, give me your address and callback number, and we'll have a team come by and have a look. Pam jotted down all the pertinent information. She had to use a pencil since pens, as well as other more complex things, just didn't work around this old business. Pam had to leave her cell phone on the shelf by the front door. All the staff working at the Bogus Anomalous Group, as well as any and all customers, had to relinquish any and all electronic devices at the entryway or run the risk of picking up something well beyond any kind of a virus. There was a huge sign by the front door informing all who entered to do so or else. Pam had put the sign up more to remind herself than others. The caller continued. Could you come by, say, around 9 p.m.? No, make that 10. Oh, 11 would be better. I don't want the neighbors to know anything is going on. All right, we'll see you then. Pam hung up, thinking she needed to work on her conclusion statement just a tad. Flipping through the Rolodex, Pam started looking for the Ghost Investigations team. She started at G and then P, and next she tried H for haunting, but found H had haint as a selection. You ever come up with this filing system was certifiably nuts. Pam had been battling this unique way of filing for the last month, ever since she was hired to work here. The first name on the haint team was Barbara. The last name was just a smear, her phone number. George Zimbalinski and Manuel Vargas were listed as well. Pam dialed Barbara first. Ms. Barbara, ma'am, are you available for a ghost hunt tonight around 11 p.m.? Someday Pam would find out what this woman's last name was. Oh, hello, Pam. How are things at the office? No, sorry, we're doing an investigation at the sports arena tonight. The home team has become convinced the other guys have placed a hex on them. Oh, okay. I'll get George to have a look then. Pam felt just a bit less enthusiastic. Not happening. George and Manuel are working with me, as well as Cassandra and Mikey. It's a big job. There was a long pause in the conversation. Why don't you handle it? You're one of the better psychics at the office. Oh, come on. I'm just the Pam had found some of her new talents were talking to ghosts and hearing voices. Too bad the voices were anything but helpful. I don't think my mom would let me go. That wasn't going to work either. Just a month ago, she'd gone out at midnight with a strange old man who slept through the investigation. Not to mention the demon battle. That would have been George, of course. Oh, okay, I'll have a quick look. Hope you all have a good night tonight. Pam hung up and got on with her busy schedule. An old woman came strolling in and stood in front of Pam's desk. She leaned on her cane for support. The door she had come through had failed to close. It never closed completely. No one ever broke in because there was little to be had other than old office furniture. My name is Mrs. Hatchet. Is Cassandra in? I feel in need of a healing. Cassandra was the best energy healer in the entire state, country, area. Pam looked over her shoulder at the status board, a chalkboard with people's names and paper arrows showing if they were in or not. I'm afraid Cassandra isn't in today. She has a big thing on tonight. Pam looked up and down the listed staff. How about Hildegard Nesmeristisis? She's new, but Cassandra says she's got a lot of potential. That was kind of what she had said. Well, okay, I'll see the new girl then. The old lady looked around the room as if expecting Hilda to be standing there waiting. Hildegard is in room 2C, right up the stairs. Pam pointed up the way, 2 tall staircase. Since the first floor ceiling was about 20 feet high, the staircase was well over 20 feet up, more like 2 stories in a normal building. The Bogus Anomalous group occupied an old mansion built back in the turn of the century, and not this one, but the one before it. It was a 3-story building with a huge attic and a basement that, until recently, was unused. Hildegard Nesmeristisis was a temp, hired to fill in when Cassandra became overworked. She was a referral from the friend of someone who knew Cassandra. Energy healers tended to know each other, but not all that well. Mrs. Hatchet stood there looking up the stairs. Cassandra has an office here on the ground floor. Pam was very much cognizant of the location of their best healer. It's only up 1 floor. Ah, but what a floor it is. Do you think you can make it on your own? Why don't you folks have an elevator like most businesses? Pam glanced over at the wall by the staircase. There sat a door to the only elevator in the building. The door was intricately carved wood with glass inserts. It ran all the way to the 3rd floor, but it was only big enough to accommodate Prince Guapo de Cuerpo. He had insisted on having an elevator so he could come and go as he pleased. The door was all of 2 feet high. Are you going to need a hand getting up the stairs? Pam hoped not, as she was wearing her new high heels and hadn't had a chance to break them in yet, or her feet. Would you be so kind? The lady held out her arm, waiting for assistance. Pam stepped from behind her desk and grasped the arm. Come with me and we'll tackle this mountain together. She put on her bravest face. Pam would rather not gone, but duty calls. The stairs had been carpeted at one time. Now you had to use your imagination to visualize what had been opposed to what now was. The first tread let out a loud creak, or was that Pam's knee? Let me know if I'm going too fast. Pam had to practically pull the customer up onto the first step. With each stair step passing under their feet, the pair soon found themselves at the halfway point. If you consider 5 minutes climbing stairs soon. We're almost there, just a tiny bit more. Pam wanted to sit down and let her feet rest. The old woman with her looked just about undone. I just think how great it will feel when Hilda gets to working on you. Pam considered getting the healer to work on her feet as well. Pam pulled the woman's arm. At long last, they bested the stairs and walked into the 2nd floor with a feeling of accomplishment and victory. Her office is right there. Do you still need a hand? The look on Mrs. Hatchet's face said it all. Okay, come on, I'll get you inside if it's the last thing I'd do. Perhaps that was just a bit too much. The door to 2C was partway open, so Pam pushed the door open and escorted the customer in. Room 2C was kind of a multi-purpose room. There was a desk against one wall, a few chairs here and there. A massage table was set in the middle of the room, and it was covered with a sheet running the gambit of the chakra colors. Hildegard Nesmeristicist sat in the corner reading a magazine about, well, what else? Healing. She looked like anything but a healer. Her hair was a riot of colors, some never before seen on Earth. Her top was a bit, as in way too tight, and her skirt was more of a belt. The shoes she wore added a good 6 inches to her height. She looked like she should have been working at a bar instead of an energy healer. Hilda, this is Mrs. Hatchett, your next customer. She would like a healing. Pam guided the woman over near the massage table. It became apparent the table was too tall for this senior citizen. Hilda came bounding over and ready to put healing to customer. Could you give me a hand getting her up onto the table? Hilda used the edge of the table to pull herself back to a standing position. Oh, yuck. You have to touch an old lady. You'll get cooties. I'll see what I can do. Pam had been hearing voices from the past month. They were more of a background hindrance than any kind of help. Between the two young'uns, they managed to heft the woman up onto the table with a little grunting and complaining as possible. There, that wasn't so bad. Hilda wiped the sweat from her forehead. I'll leave you two alone now. Holler when you're finished. Hopefully I'll be out of the building by then. Pam headed for her desk and some much-needed time off her feet. I'm never wearing heels again. Yeah, right. That's what you said yesterday. Oh, shut up. I'm not listening to you. Pam looked up at the people in the waiting room. Who's next? Pam got busy sending customers to their desired staff members. After about 45 minutes, Pam heard the sound of hollow high heels on wooden steps. Clunk, 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 coming down from above. Glancing over her shoulder, she saw Hilda was helping her old customer down from her visit. Everything go as planned? The old lady looked in amazingly good shape. Oh, yes, this new girl is quite the cat's pajamas. This elicited a glance from the prince, who was sleeping on top of the filing cabinet. Hilda got the woman out the door and then turned to Pam and fell on her face. I'm okay, just got tangled in my own feet. Hilda tried to get back up. Those overly high shoes she wore made this more of a spectacle than a maneuver. I've got it. Don't bother. I'm good. Hilda was now crawling along the floor over to the banister. Using the newel post, she pulled herself into a semi-standing position. I got it. No worries. With a crash, she went back down on her sitter. Holding one hand up to keep Pam from rendering any aid, she got her knees onto the top step. Send up the next customer, and with that, Hilda began to climb the stairs on her knees. I will never be that vain about my looks. Pam hoped she spoke soft enough that nobody overheard. Remember those shoes on your feet. Around noon, Pam was in need of a break. As she'd answered the phone, sent dozens of customers to see staff, wrestled with her inner voice. She had quite a few. You drink way too much coffee. Does your mother know you skipped breakfast again? Not listening, Pam went to the coffee bar library to see what was available for lunch. She was of the opinion this particular voice was her conscience. The coffee bar library was the biggest room in the house, with the exception of the basement, which wasn't really a room, more like a cavern. Eddie Chavez, the barista, technical guru, was behind the counter mopping up some spilled coffee with a rag that never seemed to get stained. Your usual? He hardly needed to ask. At the end of the bar sat Wanda Murkowski, who hadn't moved in nearly 6 years, give or take a few months. She was deep in thought about something that, unfortunately, nobody could remember what she was deliberating. What do you have to eat back there? I kind of skipped breakfast again. Pam looked at the glass case with edibles set out on display. Some of the items looked as if they'd been there a while, like a year or two. Let's see, how about a peanut butter and jellyfish sandwich? He pointed out an unearthly sounding delight. It looked as unappetizing as it could be. Pam thought better things might be lurking in the dark reaches of the display. Anything less interesting? How about a vegetarian delight? He aimed one finger at a giant sandwich bursting with colors. What kind of vegetables are in it? Pam knew better than to go by looks. Some of Eddie's sandwiches could contain just about anything found in a field. This one has cauliflower, spinach, and rhubarb. Eddie looked as if he didn't think it sounded any good either. How about no? Pam looked at all the odd shapes and sometimes colored edibles. What's that thing under the bag of coffee? Pam looked at about a 25-pound sack filled with unground coffee beans. Just a word about coffee. The coffee seed is not a bean, it's a fruit. They call them coffee beans because they resemble beans, but in actuality, they're fruit. So therefore, coffee is fruit juice. Fruit juice is good for you, so indulge in as much fruit juice as you can in the form of coffee. Now back to the story. Pam settled on the mysterious sandwich that had been squashed flat under the sack. It tasted like something between Spam and laundry soap, but it went down without a fight, and it stayed there. I feel nearly human again. I better get back to work. Pam went back to her desk, only to find Prince Wapo was now curled up in the middle of her paperwork. Come on, can't you find someplace better to sleep? The cat just worked harder at ignoring Pam's request. The phone began to ring. Hello, this is the Bogus Anomalous Group. How may I assist you today? Pam had found her second wind as far as joy-filled phone answering. Oh, hello, Paula. No, Pamela. Yes, Pamela. It's her uncle, Ray, the owner of the bag company and therefore her boss. What can I do for you? That is, today. Pam was getting used to this inconsistencies. I don't know you called me. Oh, yes, I did, I think. I need you, that is you personally, not anyone else. If you wouldn't mind taking care of this for me, he rambled on to unknown thoughts without any comprehensive ending. Pam hesitated to say yes, not knowing what bizarre task might be coming her way. It would really depend on what you need me to do. Oh, yes, I need you to do. There was a long pause. I need you to drive over and pick something up at a bookstore. Yes, a book. Pam thought about the library coffee shop that must contain thousands of volumes already. Considering the unusual subject of these tomes, the book her uncle wanted must be some kind of a wild manuscript. Okay, where do I need to go? This sounded like one of the easier assignments. Not far, not too far. That is, well, it's the half-price bookstore in San Antonio. Oh, for a second there, I thought you said San Antonio, as in 300 miles south of here. Pam was relieved she had misunderstood her uncle. Yes, just a bit of a drive, that is. If you leave right now, Ray was mumbling something about driving to Canada. You want me to drive to San Antonio today to pick up a book. Why not just ask them to send it by the mail? It can't. That is, they won't allow it. Who, the people selling it? Pam was flummoxed. No, UPS, the post office, FedEx, some mumble. Wow. Pam was curious as to how weird a book had to be. No one would ship it. Wait, if they won't ship this book, why am I being asked to handle it? You shouldn't have any problems, I hope. Will I get mileage and gas for my car? Pam wanted to at least make a most for her trip. Her car was showing its age, a 1980 Malibu with mismatched doors and orange shag carpet everywhere, even the dashboard. Oh, you might ought to, I think you should use, ask Eddie if you can use the company car. Oh, Pam was about to say more, but found talking to her uncle was beginning to make her brain hurt. Okay, I'll take the company car, but what about it not having any seat belts? Um, get Eddie to fix up something. I gotta go. Click. Pam looked at the handset as if she might see her uncle and be able to give him her very best angry stare. It didn't work. Setting the handset back in the cradle, Pam went to inquire into whether Eddie could somehow manufacture a seat belt for a vehicle in question. Mr. Techno, can you do me a big favor? Pam tried fluttering her eyelashes, giving him extra cute. Pam's uncle had told Pam that everybody called Eddie Chavez Techno, but as it turns out, she was the only person to refer to him by his nickname. Wait, don't tell me. Let me guess. Eddie put on his best psychic look. You need me to install an XM radio in your car. Not quite so hard. I need some seat belts installed in the company car. Pam knew, as well as everyone working here, Eddie wasn't psychic, but very good with electronics. Considering the bizarre effects this building had on cell phones, computers, and anything electric, this was a very desirable talent. Eddie was in the process of hefting a huge book onto a shelf at the top of a ladder. Hey, why not ask Grandy? He's out there right now looking for a box filled with galvanized washers. He might be able to help you with that. Eddie didn't look too positive with his own idea. Sure thing, thanks. Pam headed out to the back. The backyard, as few ever called it, consisted of an expanse filled with just about everything other than grass. The goat, whose job it was to eat grass and keep the yard neat, was known for eating anything that wasn't grass-like, since there was none to be had. The goat was currently munching on a box filled with old recipes and donuts. The storage shed door stood open, allowing Pam to gaze in on the company car parked just inside. It was a 1970 black Cadillac station wagon, better known as a hearse. The engine had been souped up and the interior was awash with tuck and roll upholstery. When not in use, the car was washed and waxed on a weekly basis. Grandy was on his hands and knees looking under a shelf mounted on the wall next to the car. Grandy, could you do me a big favor? More eyelash flutterings. Grandy Sear was one of the more unusual psychics, if there was any such thing as an unusual psychic. He could see dead people. They didn't tell him anything or show him strange things. They just laid there dead in the position they had found as life slipped away. This led to him avoiding any place where death may have visited upon someone, which just about meant everywhere. You don't need an XM radio installed somewhere, do you? I'm not exactly into electronics, just mechanical stuff. Grandy was to mechanics what Eddie was to electronics. No, I just need some seat belts installed in the company car, and I need them in like 5 minutes. Pam did her eyelid fluttering and little girl smile on him. 5 minutes? That could take all day. He scratched his head, making his brain work harder. Well, I might be able to get it done quicker, but don't rely on them in a pinch or a crash. That made Pam feel so much better. In just under 5 minutes, Grandy announced, "She's ready, good as I can make it." Pam looked in the front seat, and sure enough, there was a set of seat belts ready for the road. The passenger side was still devoid of any kind of a safety device. Wow, that was fast. How can I thank you? Just don't get killed, at least not around here. I wouldn't want to look at your crushed corpse for the rest of my life. He had a way of making her feel so much better. Scooting in under the wheel, Pam turned the key and mentally prepared herself for the drive ahead. Did I mention the engine had been souped up a lot? As the key turned and the engine fired over, the entire vehicle shook and vibrated with anticipation of achieving warp speed by the end of the driveway. Careful so as to not ram into the main building, which was only 100 feet away, Pam put the hearse into drive and with one foot partially on the brake, pulled out and turned towards the street. There's no way this thing is street legal. Pam drove to the gate leading out to the street, which had already been rammed open on a prior occasion. Stopping just short of the pavement, Pam looked at the dashboard, wishing for some music to help out on this long trip. The AM radio was not much help, mostly talk shows and a few country stations, not what she had in mind. The weird-looking device mounted beneath the radio, something called an 8-track, didn't look too much different from a cassette player. I'll give this a try. Reaching into the glove compartment, Pam pulled the first cartridge that her fingers found. Black Sabbath? Some kind of religious music. Ugh. She tried the next cartridge she could find. King Crimson? Well, that sounds different. Pam pushed the big cassette into the player. Pulling gently onto the street, Pam did her best to not squeal the tires. Okay, now for a nice little 10.5-hour round trip. She pulled away from the stop sign with something called 21st Century Schizoid Man wailing from the surround sound. Pam tried to lower the volume by turning the knobs on the radio, but they had no effect. She ran one finger around the face of the 8-track player, but found no volume control. Okay, I'll listen to country then. She pushed the only button on the player, eject, which did nothing. Oh, now what? She tried hitting the 8-track with her hand, but all she got was a sore hand. Ouch! As the second song was halfway through playing, the tape player made a weird clicking, rattling, crunching sound. The first song began to play once more. What, you like that song? Pam asked the machine, halfway expecting an answer. As the freeway loomed ever closer, Pam got busy trying to keep the overzealous car under control. The music would just have to take care of itself. This is going to be one long drive. Pam pulled out into traffic. Once the tape gets to the end, it'll stop. My ears can't take much more of this. A King Crimson was not an acquired taste, it was a dish all of its own. Author's note. Yes, I used to listen to King Crimson way back when I was young and they were new. The vehicle vibrated with all the energy of a battleship wishing to invade another galaxy and rain death and destruction down on whatever was there needing handling. Pam tried opening the windows so the sound would have some place to go other than her ears. Feeling along the door armrest, Pam felt a set of buttons. Way too many buttons to be for the windows. She glanced down and saw there were 8 window buttons. 8? There can't be 8. Trying one button, the little triangular window next to the steering wheel swung open, letting a flow of fresh air into the driver's side. She tried the next button, and the same thing happened only on the passenger side. Okay, must be this one. The driver's window rolled down, letting a lot of air in. Kind of cold for this time of year and letting some of the music out. Yep, this is going to be a long drive. She looked for signs leading to San Antonio, which couldn't arrive too soon. As Pam passed other drivers, some would remove their hats. Others would make the sign of the cross over their chests. Pam felt very conspicuous. The rumble of the engine combined with the ear-shattering music made thought nearly impossible. After about 3 hours of nerve-wracking flight, Pam noticed the gas gauge was creeping ever closer to E, which did not stand for excellence. This thing gets horrible gas mileage. She began looking for a station to fill up. She looked at her purse sitting way over there by the passenger door. I hope I have enough cash for this trip. I only brought $40. She was enjoying this trip less and less the further down the road she got. Up ahead on the right was an old beat-up, decrepit station with an advertisement for beef jerky, something with a Bigfoot on it. As she slowed for the turn, she had second and third thoughts about this place. The gas station looked like something out of a movie, like Children of the Corn meets the Texas Chainsaw Massacre. There were only 2 pumps out front, one for regular and the other for high test. Yep, I think this is a bad idea. Looking at the gas gauge, it was bouncing listlessly over the E. Stopping next to the pump, Pam shut off the power plant, pretending to be a car. The sound of silence filled the air around her. It got so quiet Pam could hear water dripping from the bottom of the ice machine around the corner. Stepping from the vehicle, Pam looked at the pump, then the fender of the car. Oops, a gas tank must be on the other side. She walked around to have a look. Not here either. Pam went back to the driver's side just in case it had actually there. When this did nothing as far as filling the tank, she checked the passenger side once more in the event that the missing gas cap had somehow slunk around when she wasn't looking. This is just weird. Having played Ring Around the Rosie and come up short, Pam decided to head inside and throw herself on the goodwill of the attendant. They should know where the gas cap is. It's kind of their job, right? There was something banging around her legs. Looking down, Pam saw the seatbelt was still around her waist. It was not attached to the car in any way. No wonder Grandy said not to rely on it. She unhooked the nylon gadget and chunked it in through the driver's window. Or they might just kill you and eat you. Pam stopped almost to the door. No, that's just in the movies. It never really happened. Or did it? Throwing caution to the wind and needing the girls' room, Pam opened the door and stepped through, and then stopped and took just a tiny step backwards. The room in front of her was quiet, the odd place to find in a gas station. There were a few shelves with inedibles scattered about, showing a thick layer of dust. In one corner sat a black and white TV with 6 people sitting on folding chairs in front of it. They all had stopped what they were doing and turned to stare at Pam. Hanging along the back wall was what looked like things you would find in a not-so-friendly neighborhood butcher shop. The meat looked somewhat suspicious. "Can I help you?" This came from a man standing behind and leaning on the counter. He had on what used to be white t-shirt with a unknown and unwanted stain in every location possible. His teeth were outnumbered by his fingers, of which he was missing a few. The TV watchers were all silent. Now they were Pam watchers. Pam considered running from the Twilight Zone gas station and fleeing back to the 21st century. I can't, where's the gas cap on my car? Her mouth felt as dry as a brand new bag of kitty litter. She tried to swallow. The stained man at the counter looked out the window of the station. "Try the license plate." He spit in the direction of a spittoon and missed. Thank you. Gotta pay first. Don't want to have to chase you down for non-payment." This elicited an unfriendly chuckle from the Pam watchers. "Yes, of course, pay." Pam reached behind her for the door handle. "I'll just grab my purse." She pushed the door at the same time as she tried to run through it, accomplishing nothing more than bouncing off the glass. Everyone just stared as if waiting for a rabbit to pop out of her head. Pulling the door inwards, Pam was most of the way out as she said, "I'll be right back with the money." The air around her felt light and fresh. She remembered the time she fell into an open grave and had to be pulled out by George and Manuel. This was as close to an open grave as she wished to ever get again. "Oh, come on, it's not that bad. Besides, you're out of gas and the next closest station is 20 miles. You'll never make it." What to do, what to do? "Gas up, then get going." "No, you're no help." What was that? The dirty t-shirt guy had followed her out the pumps. "Oh, I was just talking to myself." Pam opened the passenger side door and grabbed her purse, which could be used as a weapon if hitting someone with a plastic bag filled with makeup could be considered self-defense. Opening the bag, Pam pulled the 220s out and held them out to Mr. Dirty T-shirt. Here, I'm going to fill up." Mr. Dirty T-shirt grabbed the greenbacks from her outstretched hand and thrust them into his pocket. "Pump is on the go-ahead." Then, to show Pam he trusted her, he stood next to her and watched. Pam walked around to the rear bumper and looked at the license plate. There was no clue as to anything hidden behind and no obvious way to open it. Pam squatted down near the bumper and ran one hand along the plate. It moved just a bit downwards. Getting a finger behind the plate, Pam pulled, and the plate came down, showing a gas cap lurking there in the middle of the opening. As soon as Pam moved her hand, the plate snapped back into place like an alligator snatching a chicken from her hand. Mr. Dirty T-shirt chuckled. Pam opened the license plate alcove once more, only to let it slam shut again. She needed the gas nozzle. Standing up on shaky legs, Pam eased over to the pump and unhooked the gas nozzle. Easier said than done. Now, armed with a potentially deadly gas hose, Pam felt just a bit less edible. Stepping back to the bumper, she squatted down once more and commenced her battle with the license plate. It would open but then close whenever she removed her hand. Finally, Pam was forced to hold the license with one hand and the nozzle with the other. She pulled the trigger to find there was no locking mechanism. Oh well, I wanted to sit here and sniff gas for a bit. The fumes swelled up around her head. The pump let out a loud dinging sound every so often that had no connection to the rotation of the changing dials. No fancy digital readout here. Pam glanced up just in time to see the $40 mark come into view and vanish. Oops! The pump stopped at $40.35. Pam looked at the gas pump and then Mr. Dirty T-shirt. "I don't think I have any more cash on me." His countenance said it all. "You owe me some more money, girlie." "Girlie? Who does he think he is calling you girlie?" Pam absolutely hated that name. "I don't. Let me check." Pam opened her purse and looked deep into the void. Not even a cent was visible in any of the recesses. She didn't carry any credit cards since her parents had joined some cult called Financial Peace. Mr. Dirty T-shirt crossed his arms and scowled. Pam opened the passenger door and looked in the glove compartment. There, under the 8-tracks, was a black leather case. Grabbing it as if it were filled with life-giving medication, Pam unzipped the case and looked inside. Credit cards. A whole bunch of credit cards from every conceivable gas station, and a few she'd never heard of. Arco? What the heck is Arco? Pam looked for any change. Her next good idea was to look under the seats. It was quite apparent somebody had gone to the trouble of vacuuming out under the seat. There wasn't as much as a speck of glitter left from Sarah Bellum's water-soaked dress. Author's note. If you read the first book, you'd know about the shootout involving a shotgun, a demon, and an accessory store. Pam opened the back and clomb inside. She crawled around, lifting up the edges of the carpet, looking for 35 cents. Look, Sir, I don't have 35 cents. Can I just charge it? What, are you some kind of a commie? Charge 35 cents? The next thing you know, you'll be asking me for access to my bank account. Pam considered making a break for it. You could buy something from the store and add 35 cents to the card. How about I buy something from the store and you can charge me the 35 cents along with everything else? Mr. Dirty T-Shirt had to think long and hard on this one. Okay, but you gotta buy something besides a soft drink. Pam hated the idea of entering the Twilight Zone once more in case this time she became stuck. Maybe if she tried to run, looking down at her new high heels, that still hurt when she walked. Pam figured she'd get about half a block before Mr. Dirty T-Shirt sicked the crazy collection of folks inside the store on her. Then again, none of them looked as if running was in their future. Opening the door, Pam stepped inside to see if, by some stretch of the imagination, she might survive this trek into the store of iniquity. You ever notice how when things get a bit nerve-wracking, your bladder goes into overdrive? That feeling of needing to go becomes Pam's main focus. Let me just use the ladies' room. She wandered to the back of the store where hopefully the throne room wouldn't be too gross. The sign that attracted her read, Ladies' Room, but that was close enough. Laddies. Opening the door, Pam was more than shocked by the condition of the relief station. To say it was nasty is nowhere near what she saw. Mike Rowe would have thrown his hands up in the air and quit. No one in their right mind would set foot inside the last resting place of meals from the past. Pam stepped inside to do what she had come to do. What do you think you're doing? This place makes the inside of the old outhouse look good. It's kind of like I need to. Pam looked at the paper dispenser gadget. Not only was it empty, it was missing. There was a hole in the wall where it might have been at one time. The hole was all the way through the wall, showing the black TV set on the other side. Well, that would come in handy if you're watching TV while battling Montezuma's revenge. Oh, you mean like the Hershey squirts? Would you guys just shut up and let me get on with it? Pam was growing tired of these voices. The deciding matter was when Pam took note of the missing toilet seat. Okay, I'm done. I'll just wait till I get back to civilization. Now to buy something to get Mr. Dirty T-Shirt off her back. Walking up and down the few aisles, Pam searched in vain for something that wouldn't kill her and looked as if it would stay in her stomach. Pickled pig's feet. Pam shook her head along with most of her body. She settled for a can of cheese woos, some crackers, and a Dr. Pepper. Mr. Dirty ran up her purchases as if she were there to rob him. It had taken some time to find a credit card he was familiar with. I've never even heard of Sinclair Gas before. Pam looked at the picture of a dinosaur on the card as he handed it back. Sign here. He held the 3-page receipt as she scribbled her name on the designated line. Pam did her best impersonation of Steve Premontaine, only in heels, and got back into the relative safety of her automobile. Climbing in, she fired up the overabundant engine and gave it way too much gas heading out the drive. Looking back for signs of pursuit, Pam saw 2 long black smoking skid marks, the cool kind, not the ones you don't want to see. Something was under her bottom, making her quite an impression on the sitter-downer. Lifting one cheek, Pam found the seat belt out from under her, down under. Tempted to chunk the worthless device into the back of the vehicle, Pam was overcome with something kind of like guilt. What do you think you're doing? It's a violation of the law, Chapter 545, Operation of a Moving Vehicle, 545.413, Safety Belt Offense. You're not allowed to occupy a motor vehicle. Okay, I'll use the thing then. Just get out of my brain. Pam got the belt wrapped around her waist and then poked the back part into the gap of the driver's seat. I feel so much safer now. The bag of semi-consumables sat on the passenger seat next to Pam's purse. Reaching over, she got the top open and pulled the drinks out. Fortunately, somebody had seen fit to install a drink holder in the space between the seats, right behind the shift lever. Next came the box of crackers. How can I do this without too much agony? Pam set one cracker on her knee and then got the cheese woos out and, without looking, shot a small dab onto the cracker. Well, that was the plan anyway. Hot aerosolized woos went down her leg and into her left shoe. Pam had that weird feeling she got any time her best plans went awry. Gads, I hope that stuff doesn't mess up my shoe. The cracker slipped off her knee and onto the floor. Next, Pam just shoved the cracker into her mouth and then placed the nozzle of the cheese-like substance in her mouth and fired. Yellow goo came rocketing out of her nose. A quick glance in the rearview mirror showed what's going on with her lunch. Two long yellow streams of yuck were now hanging from her nostrils. She looked like she'd had a very bad cold. Rummaging around in her vicinity, Pam tried to find something to wipe up the literal hot mess. Not a Kleenex or a paper towel was to be found. Traveling at 75 miles an hour was not the way to do a good cleaning job on anything, and now everything smelled like hot cheese. I've gone to do something about this mess. My dog is tearing up things, which is odd. Usually it's the cats that are tearing up things, but right now it's a dog. Pam felt as if her head were filled with goo. A head cold would have felt great compared to this. There, just ahead, was a sign. Rest area, 1 mile. Oh, take you. Pam felt as if the trip was taking a turn for the better. With King Crimson blasting from the sound system once more, playing the first selection, Pam came to a shuddering halt in front of the state's answer to long trips and too much coffee. Author's note. Those of you that had an 8-track tape player may have encountered this phenomena. The player would get stuck on one track and keep playing it over and over. A good cleaning sometimes would fix this problem, but not all the time. Jumping from the driver's door, she walked as nonchalantly as she could. Don't want to look as if I'm about to rupture some part of my lower anatomy. The cheese woos squishing in her left shoe as she walked. Why is it the number of people waiting for a stall is in direct proportion to the pressure in your bladder? Once the necessary maneuvers had been handled and the nice, clean, well-maintained bathroom taken care of by the local county officials, Pam went to the sink to see about her makeup. She could have screamed if not for the total shock that clamped her throat shut. A shock as in startled, and not shock as in a brief pause on the way to death. There was a long yellow mustache running down from each side of her mouth. A kind of an overdone Fu Manchu-looking thing, only in shiny yellow. Christopher Lee would have fired his manager and killed the makeup artist had he been seen in this guise. The front of Pam's blouse had yellow-green stain on it that, on second thought, almost looked like a happy little pattern. Using one finger, she lifted the rubbery cheese from her chin and began to pull. It came away from her skin with a nauseating kind of adhesion. What kind of goo do these frogs ooze? She tried to pull the cheese off without taking any skin. Now I've got a cat leaning against my camera. Stop it. He's looking at me like, how dare you touch me? Things were going well until the strand of cheese began an attempt at pulling loose from her sinuses. The yucky mess had filled her sinus cavities and dried inside her head. It's like removing a band aid. Just pull real fast and it won't hurt so much. Are you sure? Pam glanced at the other women in the room, hoping they wouldn't think her too weird. Most did their best to ignore Pam and run from the room as if there might be an occupant in there who was crazy. With trembling hands, Pam grasped the end of the cheese mustache and, with as much force as she could muster, pulled the mess from her nose. The parking lot was mostly empty as Pam pulled away from the curb and back out onto the highway. The sound of the 8-track was kind of soothing after the incident in the ladies' room. Things couldn't get any worse, could they? The inside of Pam's sinuses felt as if a large dog had been pulled from the small void inside her head. A bottle brush would have cleaned out the inside of her head any better. Each breath felt as if it filled her with air with a kind of a whistling sound. Her nostrils felt as if they were bigger than her brain and it was about to fall out any minute. Everything smelled like cheese. The yellow cast of her sinuses sat on the floor of the passenger seat. It was very accurate, as she could see the superior, the medial, and the inferior conchas, all perfectly preserved in cheese. Little tiny hairs were visible here and there. The feeling of having removed most of the skin from the inside of her head was something she would remember for a long time. Having one shoe glued to her foot had not even been considered as being worthy of investigation. Once you've insulted the inside of your nose, your feet can take a back seat. San Antonio loomed ahead. And with that, I am going to call this episode ended. I'm not going to do like I did last time and read for an hour and 10, 15 minutes. So, if you're enjoying the show so far, don't hesitate to listen to the next episode, which will be coming out soon. Until next time, this is Chris James for Storytime.
Are you coming to the tree where they strung up a man? They say murder 3. Strange things that happen here, no stranger would it be if we met at midnight in the hanging tree.